Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The Palestinian Authority released a statement welcoming the United Nations General Assembly's decision asking the International Justice Court to look into the legal aspects of the construction of the separating wall in the West Bank. The majority of the UN General Assembly voted in favor of a resolution that would have the International Justice Court review the case to determine whether or not Israel should destroy the wall it is building in the West Bank. 90 countries voted in favor of the resolution, 8 countries opposed it, and 74 countries abstained, including EU member countries. Meanwhile, the United States supports Israel in opposing this resolution. The U.S. forces increased their security measures in the northern Iraqi city of Al-Mosul after 2 U.S. soldiers were killed. One soldier was killed during an explosion on the side of the road. The other was killed by assailants in front of a gas station in Al-Mosul. During an incursion campaign near Samarra, northern of Baghdad, searching for an Iraqi suspected of funding the armed attacks against the U.S. forces. They arrested another man. A U.S. spokeswoman stated that they did not capture the suspect they were pursuing. However, they succeeded in arresting a relative of his who had about $2 million and fake ID cards in his possession. President of the Iraqi Interim Governing Council says that the U.S. civil administration in Iraq accepts suggestions that were previously dismissed. A demonstration was organized in Baghdad, where a group of Iraqi children expressed their desire for a better future that does not include war or destruction. The UN Secretary General Kofi Annan calls for taking measures against the killing of civilians during this war on terrorism. He made his statements after U.S. air raids in Afghanistan killed 9 children. This is the largest attack against Taliban fighters in Afghanistan. The U.S. Army expressed its sorrow for the death of 9 children in a village 85 kilometers southwest of Afghanistan. According to military reports, the air raid was targeting a leader of one of the armed groups.
Mountain avalanche?
Yes, we make mistakes. War is not an art of precision. There is a lack of clarity during war. But we will continue to do our work, and we can do better to help them.
The U.S. Army declared that their soldiers found the children's bodies near the body of a wanted suspect named Al-Mullah Wazir. He was a known local figure. Reports indicate that he was involved in the attacks against Afghans working on the Kabul-Kandahar highway, while also attacking foreign troops and aid workers. Afghan officials, however, thought that he was killed.
We can't compensate
the families immediately, but what we can do is to help the village in general. We have a reconstruction team in Ghazna, and they are trying to help the whole area. In this particular case, we can focus our reconstruction efforts on the village to show our commitment to them.
Meanwhile, the U.S. spokesman stated that about 2,000 U.S. soldiers are on a mission to pursue Taliban members, either to capture or kill them, and to secure the region for aid and reconstruction work. The UN General Assembly is holding a special session to review a draft resolution submitted by the Arab group. It is in regards to the separating wall being built on Palestinian territories by the Israeli occupation forces. They want to present the case at the International Court in La Haye. The Israeli government immediately announced that it will not consider this resolution, saying that this is an unprecedented and dangerous initiative.
The Palestinians are confident that the UN General Assembly will pass a resolution submitting the case of the separating wall in the West Bank to the International Justice Court in La Haye, despite the objections of Israel and some European countries. The UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan released a report saying that Israel failed to comply with the Security Council's demands to stop building the security fence, thus compelling the Palestinian ambassador to the UN, Nasser al-Qudwa, to encourage passing this resolution. Since the resolution is expected to pass, Israel is rushing to condemn it, saying it's an acceptable initiative and it is not up to the UN or any other international agency to make decisions concerning the legal aspects of building the wall.
We're building the fence about 600 kilometers long. The Palestinians forced us to do so when they adopted the strategy of terror. Now, things are turning over to try the victim, Israel. The UN has been passing resolutions against Jews and against Israel since 1947.
Meanwhile, the Palestinians condemn Israel's ongoing construction of the separating wall, because it separates Palestinian towns and neighborhoods from each other.
The Israelis must stop the construction of the wall, because the wall does not separate the Palestinians from the Israelis. It separates the Palestinians from each other. It also has a catastrophic impact on the Palestinian economy, health, and education.
Several EU countries support the resolution. However, other countries, such as Britain, believe that this issue should be dealt with during peace negotiations rather than in the courts.
4 days after the Geneva Accords were signed in Switzerland, the two architects of the peace initiative, the former Israeli Minister of Justice, Yossi Beilin, and the former Palestinian Minister of Information, Yasser Abed Rabbo, met with the U.S. Secretary of State, Colin Powell, who supported the initiative, but with reservation. He gave priority to the roadmap, just like President Bush, who said that the Geneva Accords may be useful. Abed Rabbo and Beilin went to the United Nations headquarters in New York and met with its General Secretary, Kofi Annan, who also confirmed that the roadmap is still the foundation for peace. Meanwhile, Palestinian opposition groups considered the treaty as a betrayal and completely rejected it. What are the implications of the Geneva Accords, considering the Palestinian ceasefire negotiations, which were concluded in Cairo, and the anticipated meeting that will take place between Sharon and Korea? The two architects of the Geneva Accords emphasized that it does not contradict the roadmap, rather it complements it. The UN General Secretary Kofi Annan welcomed the accords and promised to bring it to the table in the next meeting of the Quartet Committee, which approved the roadmap. Colin Powell emphasized that the roadmap is the foundation for peace, saying that it is the most appropriate plan for the American perspective.
The roadmap is more suitable from the perspective of the U.S. because it was internationally approved.
Describing the Geneva Accords as a constructive initiative pleased its architects, who considered their peace initiative as an alliance between reasonable people in spite of what he called extremists. These were the words of Yossi Beilin, who expressed satisfaction with Kofi Annan's position.
I did not expect a better welcome to the initiatives. We will evaluate it during the meeting that will be held in Cairo next January.
Beilin and Abed Rabbo went further than the roadmap by negotiating over two important files that have prevented the Palestinian wounds from healing: the right of return and East Jerusalem. Nonetheless, it seems that Beilin himself has forgotten that the Oslo Peace Accords, which he supervised in 1993, were destined to failure from the start.
The Israeli occupation forces used 20 military vehicles to enter Tulkarm, northeast of the West Bank, and arrested 15 Palestinians. A spokesman from the Palestinian Security announced that the occupation authority completed the construction of 3 military towers for monitoring activities in Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip. The occupation forces also built a road around the Netzarim settlement in the Strip. In response to the violations committed by the occupation forces, Palestinian resistance fighters detonated an explosive device underneath an Israeli patrol vehicle as it was passing in an area in northern Gaza. They also launched mortar shells at the Rosh Khatif settlement. Meanwhile, dozens of Palestinians went to a demonstration in protest of the so-called Geneva Accords, holding signs that denounced the accords. The Palestinian Foreign Minister Nabil Shaath emphasized that the Palestinian refugees will never accept a settlement in any Arab country under any circumstances, explaining that the Geneva Accords are unofficial and that attaining the right of return for Palestinian refugees is a fundamental condition for the success of any peace negotiation with the Israelis. The founder of the Hamas movement, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, reiterated his rejection to the accords, explaining that the right of return belongs to all Palestinian refugees and no one has the authority to give it up.
In Cairo, negotiations between the 13 Palestinian factions collapsed as they failed to reach a ceasefire agreement and refused to give the Palestinian Authority the power to negotiate a ceasefire with the occupation forces. Hamas and another 4 Palestinian factions rejected the Egyptian proposal to reach a comprehensive ceasefire agreement. The head of Hamas delegates, Mohammed Nazar, said that this is the final answer of his organization and that the Egyptians, as well as the rest of the Palestinian factions, will be notified of it. Hamas's response came after the head of the Egyptian intelligence had told the Palestinian factions that halting attacks only against civilians is not enough. Sulaiman asked the Palestinian factions to re-evaluate their position and consider reaching a comprehensive ceasefire.
Manar correspondent in the West Bank reported that Israeli occupation forces raided the town of Jenin early Monday. 20 military vehicles were seen in the city's streets, and our correspondent added that Israeli soldiers detained 2 Palestinians, Muhammad Zuaini and Raja al-Ghazali, and took them away as they withdrew from the city. In another development, an Israeli settler was injured when his car was attacked near the Azmi Hifit settlement east of Tulkarm, in which occupation troops arrested 15 Palestinians Sunday night. Israel braced itself Monday for another setback in the United Nations ahead of a vote which is expected to see a request for the International Court of Justice to rule on the legality of its West Bank separation wall. At an earlier special session on the barrier held October 21st, the General Assembly overwhelmingly adopted a resolution deeming construction of such a barrier illegal under international law and calling for Israel to stop and reverse construction. Israel insists that the barrier, which at times cuts deep into Palestinian territory, is merely designed for security reasons. But the Palestinians regard what they have dubbed the apartheid wall as an attempt to preempt the borders of any future two-state settlement and grab some of their most fertile land.
I believe there is a unified international position today, including the United States, Europe, all over, that the Israeli government must stop building the wall. Because the wall is not a security wall separating between Palestinians and Israelis. It's a wall that separates Palestinians from Palestinians, and it really undermines the livelihood of Palestinians, and it will have a devastating impact on the economy, agriculture, education, health of more than 600,000 Palestinians, as was explained in the UN report.
Israeli Channel 10 reported that the Israeli National Control Center is building a secret bunker in the occupied Jerusalem hills for the Prime Minister and his government to continue running the country if the country comes under a large-scale attack or a disaster. The secret construction work has been carried out around the clock for the past few months. Complex computer systems will be installed at the National Control Center bunker to enable the government to function during times of extreme crisis. The parliamentary elections in Russia is described as a political earthquake after it strengthened the Kremlin's grip over parliament and led to the ousting of the liberals from the Duma. President Vladimir Putin hailed the elections as a victory for democracy, but international observers said the elections failed to meet many democratic criteria and called into question Moscow's commitment to Western standards of democracy.
Russian President Vladimir Putin's party triumphed in a decisive parliamentary election that crushed the communists and left liberal parties shut out of the chamber for the first time in the post-Soviet era. The leading opposition Communist Party suffered excruciating losses in Sunday's poll to the State Duma, or lower house of parliament, and its leader accused the Kremlin of rigging the vote and refused to accept its results. But until now, international observers said nothing irregular had been seen.
This is a shameful farce which has nothing to do with the country's interest or democracy. If you want to have a police democracy, then you can see it all right now. I don't think any of you are interested in such a turn of events.
Meanwhile, pro-Putin blocs were approaching the two-thirds majority needed for the Kremlin chief to alter the constitution and perhaps extend his term in office for many more years to come. Results issued after 82% of the ballots had been counted gave Putin's United Russia Party 36.7% of the vote. The communists slipped into second place with 12.8%, while in one of the day's biggest surprises, the pro-Putin nationalist Vladimir Zhirinovsky and his LDPR party stormed into third place with 12%. Rodina, a 3-month-old party that analysts believe the Kremlin created to steal the communist vote, was in a strong fourth place with 8.9%. All the other parties, including the two main liberal groups, Union of Right Forces and Yabloko, fell under the 5% barrier that guarantees automatic Duma seats.
This is very dangerous for Russia, and this is very dangerous for the world, because while a democratic Russia is not a danger to anybody, an authoritarian Russia with the nuclear weapons is a serious problem for not only Russia and the CIS, but for the whole world.
The fourth election since the Soviet Union collapsed looks set to hand the highly popular Putin greater powers to drive economic reform, crack down on corruption, boost his bureaucracy and rein in the business allied in a country craving stability they garnered in the 1999 election.
U.S. Central Command said that U.S. surveillance helicopters had killed an Iraqi fighter after coming under fire in the past 24 hours in the Ramadi area west of the capital during reconnaissance of a suspected ambush location. Meanwhile, U.S. occupation forces conducted a raid in Baquba, north of Baghdad, in the early hours of Monday morning. Troops raided the home of a man they suspect has been acting as an arms dealer, supplying weapons to anti-occupation forces in the area. The commander of occupation forces in Iraq, Ricardo Sanchez, said he expected rise in attacks as the June 30th deadline approaches for the transfer of authority from occupation officials to a new Iraqi government. Sanchez did say that U.S. forces assumed Saddam Hussein was still operating inside Iraq, but added that finding Saddam wouldn't end resistance to the U.S.-led occupation.
In terms of the search for Saddam, a needle in the haystack, clearly we haven't found the right haystack, and we'll continue. We're all focused on trying to find this needle out there, and by God, it's a hard problem, and you all have to help me. And the Iraqi people have to help us try to get Saddam so that we can get on with the business of the people of Iraq getting on with their lives and the country becoming a democratically based prospering nation.
The Commonwealth Summit drew towards its close on a sour note of crisis and recrimination after Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe angrily pulled his country out of the world body. Mugabe's decision made a mockery of the summit's three-day wrangle over whether or not to lift Zimbabwe's suspension from the association, a row which had threatened to split its 54 leaders on quasi-racial lines.
A defiant Zimbabwe withdrew from the Commonwealth of Britain and its former colonies hours after the 54 bloc extended its 18-month suspension of the Southern African nation for alleged abuse of civil liberties. Commonwealth spokesman Joel Kibazo insisted that the summit had not been a complete failure, but admitted that the withdrawal had been a disappointment.
No denying any country that decides to quit it's a serious issue for the Commonwealth. It isn't something that we like. It isn't something that happens often. So one, at the end of the day, tries to bridge the gap. And at the end of the day, we'll just have to wait and see how that is to be done.
Zimbabwe's Southern African powerful supporters in the Commonwealth, led by South Africa's President Thabo Mbeki, had opposed Zimbabwe's continuing suspension and lobbied hard for readmission at the summit. But the so-called White Commonwealth of Britain, Australia and New Zealand favored a tough line and won the support of a largely silent majority of Caribbean, Asian and Pacific states, along with some Africans. South Africa will take the view that the tough line effectively forced Zimbabwe out and ended the Commonwealth's ability to bring pressure to bear on him to reform his autocratic rule and basket case economy. British Foreign Secretary Jack Straw said he regrets Zimbabwe's decision to withdraw from the Commonwealth, but looked forward to a time after President Mugabe leaves office for the country to rejoin the club of former British colonies. President Robert Mugabe accused Britain and other Anglo-Saxon countries of punishing him for the land reforms that have given white own to landless black. His argument finds resonance with many other African leaders whose political lives started in the fight against British imperialism. Many Africans suspect British demands for democratic reforms are a cover for protecting white farmers and their land.
3 Germans have been kidnapped in Iran's southeastern province of Sistan Balochistan, which has a reputation of being one of the unsafest regions of the country. A government source said Monday the Germans were seized near Nusrat Abad on the road between the historic city of Vam and Zahedan near the Pakistani border. A report on the unofficial Ruwaydad website said the Germans were tourists who were cycling to Zahedan. It said they were abducted several days ago by members of the Shah Bakhash and Naruwi tribes who were demanding a ransom for their release.
Leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is urging municipal officials in Tehran to rely on divine assistance and scientific advances to seriously follow up with efforts to serve the public. The leader told members of Tehran's Islamic City Council, mayor, and municipal managers on Monday such efforts will help them secure the blessing of the Almighty and satisfaction of members of the public. Ayatollah Khamenei thanked the City Hall for the services it has rendered to residents of the capital, saying, "Honest efforts by officials to serve Iranians will inject an air of liveliness and energy into the society." The leader said measures taken to settle the problems metropolitan Tehran is facing are constructive yet insufficient, adding, "One can easily see sincere efforts are underway to offer better services." Ayatollah Khamenei then urged state institutions such as municipalities, which are in direct contact with people, to put endeavors to render broader services high on their agenda, saying, "To that end, the expertise of scholars along with scientific approaches should be used." The leader went on to say, "Elimination of urban problems takes a lot of time," adding, "First, all problems should be diagnosed before a thorough planning is made to have them settled." The leader urged municipal officials to do their best to make religious attitude and Islamic ethics the mainstay of the capital, adding, "Such efforts hold the key to progress because many of the problems Iran is now facing stem from indifference to ethical questions." At the meeting, Tehran's Mayor Mahmoud Ahmadinejad presented a progress report on the workings of the municipality. Iran and Iraq have put seals on a cooperation document in the area of transportation. Under the deal inked by and between Iranian Roads and Transport Minister Ahmad Khorram and his Iraqi counterpart Behnam Ziabulis, the two sides agreed to construct a border bridge to link the southern port cities of Khorramshahr and Basra, and also establish a railway link from Iran's western border of Khosravi to Iraq's Khanaqain. Speaking on the sidelines of the ceremony, Mr. Khorram said the plan to link Iran's rail network to Iraq and to Syria, once operational, will help cut rail travels from Iran to Syria to less than 24 hours. Referring to the annual exchange of 1 million pilgrims between Iran and Iraq, the Iranian minister hoped the two sides will promote cooperation in the fields of transportation. Meanwhile, on Monday, an international conference on railways technology got underway in Tehran. Addressing the forum, the managing director of Iranian's railways company, Mohammad Saeednejad, announced that Mashhad-Baf Railway, going on stream by the end of the incoming Iranian year, starting as of March 19th, will shorten Sarakhs-Bandar Abbas Transit Railway by 900 kilometers. Mr. Saeednejad went on to say, construction of a total of 3,400 kilometers of railways is underway across the nation, completion of which will establish a railway link between Europe and Southern Asia, as well as Central Asian states to Oman Sea, south of Iran. Tehran is playing host to an international gathering on Caucasian security. Janin Saitoferi has got a report.
Representatives from 26 countries have converged on Tehran to take part in an international gathering on security in South Caucasus. Threats to regional security and ways to counter them are the main focus of the event. In a message to the forum, Iranian President Mohammad Khatami said, when independent states began to emerge in southern Caucasus in the early 90s, Iran was quick to recognize them, made efforts to expand bilateral ties, and mediated in some regional conflicts, urging belligerent parties to adopt judicious approaches in pursuit of their political objectives. The president further said, détente, dialogue among civilizations, and good neighborliness are the mainstay of Iran's foreign policy, adding, Tehran favors to see a stable and progressive Caucasus thrive in its northern backyard. Foreign Minister Kemal Kharazi told the gathering one cannot draw a line between security in South Caucasus and that of the Caspian Sea, adding Tehran views security in the landlocked sea as crucial to its national interests. He added Tehran's active strategy on the Caucasian security is designed to prevent conflicts and consolidate its stability in the region as a whole. The United States is after presence in the region to secure its interests, something which leaves an adverse impact on regional cooperation, said the Iranian top diplomat on the sidelines of the event. The two-day forum has 6 working groups to study security matters of the Caucasus. Saitofiri, Tehran.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.